Hey, what's going on everyone? Justin here, and in this video I want to go over some of my favorite ancient history recommendations. This was a requested video for one of the prompts of the History Challenge readathon. If you don't know what this is, I'll leave a link down below to the announcement video. And essentially it's a really cool readathon in the second half of the month of August that I am co-hosting with 3 other people, where we're just going all in with nonfiction history. And a lot of people seem really excited about it. I hope you are too. And let's just go ahead and get started with some of my favorite ancient history recommendations. And I classify personally ancient history as anything pre-classical, so anything before Greece and Rome, the Greco-Roman age, so roughly about 500 BCE or earlier, depending on the, obviously a little bit depends on kind of like the location and everything like that, but for a lot of people Greece and Rome would definitely classify as ancient history as well. But I will be doing separate videos on Greece and Rome. Just I have so many books specifically just on those topics as well. But yeah, let's just go ahead and get started. Oh, and one last thing: if you are participating in the History Challenge readathon and you want some recommendations on one of the specific prompts, I'll link the all the different prompts below as well in the document. Just let me know, and I'll be glad to go ahead and make another video just for that prompt. So I got two ones I don't actually physically have. The first one was an audiobook that I listened to, and it's Babylon, Mesopotamia and the Birth of Civilization. And it's by Paul Krivacek, I believe it's pronounced. And this is all about purely kind of Mesopotamian history. Obviously with the title Babylon, it's kind of dealing with, Sumer at the beginning, kind of the old Babylonian period under like Hammurabi is probably the most famous character. I keep saying character, but it's not a character. Historical figure from that era. Though you also learn about there are others. Everyone knows Hammurabi as the first lawgiver, even though that's not really true. Actually, the first law code still was Babylonian, but I think it was about 100 to 150 years before Hammurabi under Ur-Nammu. But anyways, that's kind of besides the point. I thought it was pretty well done. I like how it was actually concise to just Mesopotamia, because a lot of, as you'll see, a lot of the ancient Near Eastern stuff sort of deals with more or less the entire Near East, which it's understandable because that is kind of like just a block segment of the world that was like always interacting, especially throughout the entire Bronze Age and even afterwards. It was always kind of like I don't want to say unified because obviously they were not unified, but it was always they were always culturally like interacting with each other, I should say, kind of as like a big unit. But anyways, sometimes it's nice to actually pick out some of the I don't know, the polities and states and actually do an in-depth dive look at each one. All right, the next one is going to be one of the great courses, and it's Ancient Empires Before Alexander, and I believe this one is by Robert Dice, or Professor Robert Dice. And this one is fantastic. He covers like 10 or 11, maybe 12 different empires, obviously before Alexander the Great. And this, we've got Sumer, we've got Ancient Akkad with Sargon the Great, for example, the Ur-3 dynasty. He even covers Mitanni, the Kassite Empire, even Carthage later on. I think he kind of threw that in there because he likes Carthage. But one of my favorite highlights of this lecture was he has, I think, I would believe it was 4 or 5 lectures on the Hittites under the kingdom of Hatti, which is my favorite ancient Near Eastern empire. It's kind of sad I have like a ranking system of my favorite ancient Near Eastern empires. If you don't know, the Hittites were an ancient Anatolian people. Anatolia, if you don't know, is essentially where Turkey is today. And a lot of people just kind of like forget about them for whatever reason. Actually, before the late 1800s, most scholars didn't even believe the Hittites were a real people until like the capital of Hattusa was excavated and stuff. So, anyways, this course is really cool because he deals a lot with the primary sources, but you're also covering not just the political schema, even though that's probably like the dominant factor. Like military stuff is covered, social life is covered, like law and like judicial stuff, I guess, is covered, religion is covered. So it's got a lot of kind of cool stuff kind of going on. And like I said, covers literally basically every single empire in the ancient Near East before Alexander. So that's really cool. Even some of the ones that we don't know too much about. I think he did have like a lecture on the Kassites, even though there's not that much information on them. So it's really cool that he decided to also include them. All right. all these videos seem to end up with some Oxford very short introductions, just because they have so many books on like every topic imaginable. I mentioned this one in my last video on recommendations by, or my second to last video, I think, on history works written by women authors. And I'm not going to go into too much, but obviously the Ancient Near East, a very short introduction. It's kind of dealing with, the entire Ancient Near East, like I was kind of talking about. And it's kind of a broad topic for like a very short introduction, but I think she does a really good job bringing out some of the highlights. Like I said, I remember the Urnamu thing being the first lawgiver, being in this one. She does deal with like archaeological evidence and stuff, so it's really cool. And then she also has, Amanda Potney does have a great course on Mesopotamia as well. And just another one, not purely just Ancient Near Eastern, it's Ancient Warfare by Harry Sidebottom, but it does, the first portions of the book definitely deal with kind of like the origins of like military warfare, or organized military warfare anyways. Though obviously you kind of get into like Greco-Roman stuff later on, because like I said, most people do classify kind of the classical world also in the ancient period. Alright, for kind of definitely a drier book, this is a textbook I had in college, but I decided to keep it because I liked it. It's History of the Ancient Near East, 3000 to 323 by Marc Van de Meroop. And I actually think there is a third edition now. What I really enjoyed about this book is there's a lot of primary sources, and there's a lot of illustrated, or I guess photograph evidence. As you can see, like, it's kind of worn and stuff, and you get like a feel for kind of like the cuneiform and everything like that. And I believe this one covers almost all. There's one empire or one like state that's not included, and I think it's doesn't include ancient Egypt, because ancient Egypt has like its own book in this series. But it does have like one final chapter on the Persian Empire, but it's kind of like just a really cursory kind of overview, obviously, because the Persian Empire, it's kind of a big thing to sort of deal with, especially like if you have 15 chapters, leaving the last one to it. Remember, that was kind of a weird thing. But the highlight of this book is definitely with the primary sources dealing with the Club of the Great Powers, which, if you don't know what that is, and kind of the towards the end of the Bronze Age, like roughly, I don't know, say 1500 to 1000, or until the Bronze Age collapsed anyways, there was the Club of the Great Powers, where all, let's see, it would have been Egypt, the Hittites, Mitanni, the Kassites, and later on the Assyrians. They would always address each other, like the kings of each of these, I guess in Pharaoh, in the case of Egypt, would always address each other as like brothers and stuff. And it's a really unique system. Essentially, state trade, or trade between different kingdoms and states, was done essentially as gift giving between the monarchs to other countries. So it's just a really unique kind of setup. It's kind of hard to explain everything just in a little video like this, but I encourage you to check it out. It's just like, it'll never happen again in the history of the world, I can guarantee that. But it's kind of just a neat period in time. It's one of my favorite times in the ancient world, and I think this book does a great job sort of addressing that period. And let's see. And then, speaking of the Bronze Age collapse, I also have Eric Klein's 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed. And this is all about, obviously, the end of the Bronze Age, in which this was the most calamitous probably time period in a long time. Like, the fall of Rome had nothing on the Bronze Age collapse. Essentially, all the great powers that I just mentioned in the Club of the Great Powers, or the let's see, the Hittites, the old Assyria. Well, I guess old Assyria really wasn't a thing, but the Hittites were pretty much taken out. All the Babylonian and Mesopotamian empires were pretty much wiped out for a while. Egypt barely hung on, and that was kind of like they never like came back from it. They were always kind of like a second-rate power or third-rate power after the Bronze Age collapse, around, not exactly in 1177 BC, but that's a pretty good estimate, during the 12th century BCE, in which there's so many factors going on. There was famine, there was earthquakes, there was just kind of like a general systems collapse when the sea peoples were raiding. Also, like the Minoans and Mycenaeans well, I guess the Minoans were pretty much already gone by then, but the Mycenaeans also ended during their empire, or civilization pretty much ended during the Bronze Age collapse as well. But like I said, just tons of states essentially just ceased to exist. Literacy pretty much completely like got wiped out, and you're kind of entering kind of like the Dark Ages and stuff, like the ancient period Dark Ages. Probably not the best term for it. My only concern, I guess it wasn't a concern, my only critique of the book was that essentially the answer to the Bronze Age collapse is a bunch of stuff was happening, and they all like worked together to cause it to happen. It's like, well, obviously that's kind of the point, but I wanted like a little bit more of a clear-cut answer with that. But yeah, definitely check this out if you're into like empires falling and stuff and never returning. All right, and then one more. Like I said, I mentioned the Hittites were my favorite, so I had to include one Hittite book. I got a couple down here, but I'm gonna go with my Folio Society one. That was by O.R. Gurney. And I don't know, this is just my favorite one volume book over the Hittites. There is probably one that's slightly better that I have by Trevor Bryce, The Kingdom of the Hittites. That one's a little bit kind of like super scholarly, and even it's like pretty dry. This one is fairly readable though, and you get a kind of a sense over the entire history of the Hittite Empire, which a lot of people, like I said, don't know about. And before their capital Haduza was discovered and excavated, most scholars didn't even believe it existed. Kind of like the same situation with like the Trojan War back then. You were kind of patted on the head and be like, oh, you're such a naive young scholar believing like that was a real thing. But obviously it turns out the Hittites definitely were real. You get a good political overview. You learn all about their culture, all about their judicial system and stuff. And like one of the I wish I had like looked up the page for that. Of course, what are the chances I'll ever find that again? Probably never. Oh boys, I actually found it pretty quickly. Just for an example, like I said, this is say the 14th, 13th, 12th century BCE, and this is like an actual primary source from. Okay, let me just read it for you. I'm totally screwing up. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so here's some instructions to the judicial magistrate that the king of Hatti would give to the magistrate. Into whatever city you return, summon forth all the people of the city. Whoever has a suit, decide it for him and satisfy him. If the slave of a man, or the maidservant of a man, or a bereaved woman has a suit, decide it for them and dissatisfy them. Do not make the better case the worse, or the worse case the better. Do what is just. And it kind of goes on and stuff, but that whole concept of like anyone could like bring suits and stuff, and obviously there was probably still corruption and stuff, but the kind of the ideal of people in like the lower orders of society being able to at least have some sort of recourse against people in a higher class in society is pretty unique for the ancient Near East, and that's kind of why I like the Hittites. Is they're kind of the oddball, maybe not the oddballs, not the right term, but they definitely have a little bit more, I guess, different approach to a lot of things compared to some of the other like older civilizations, such as old Babylon and like the Earthly Dynasty and stuff that came a little bit before them. But like I said, if you're interested in the Hittites, I would definitely encourage the Hittites by O.R. Gurney. And you don't have to get the Folio Society edition. This one just came with my little 4-volume set of the ancient Near East from the Folio Society. But anyways, there you have it. Those are some of my favorite ancient history books, I guess. I'll be doing Greece and Rome and somewhat in the near future. Like I said, if you have any recommendations from any of the prompts in the history challenge, let me know, and I'll be glad to do a video just for those prompts if you'd like me to. And if you have any recommendations for good ancient history books of any kind, leave some comments down below. This is definitely the time period in history I need the most recommendations. With my medieval and Greek and Roman stuff, I get lots of recommendations, plus I'm able to find like lots of good recommendations myself. Ancient history, like pre-classical civilizations, I don't do quite as well, and I'm not really sure why. So if you have any, leave some links down below or comments down below, and I'd be really glad to go ahead and check them out. If you like the video, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all that cool stuff, and check out my Twitter and Instagram. I think that's all the plugs. I gotta find a better way to like transition into like all the plugs. It's just like blah, 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 all of a sudden. But anyways, whether you're reading ancient history or not, always remember, read victoriously.